Before this video begins, I would like to take a quick moment to thank Bain Books for helping set up the interview that is in this video, and I would also like to apologize for the audio quality. When I was working in editing this video, I ran into some problems and I was not able to get the best audio quality. So you can still hear the interview, but it's just, you might have to turn up your volume a lot. I apologize for that. This was in no way the fault of the author or the publisher that helped set this up. This was my problem in editing, but I still hope that you enjoy the video.
Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Robert Hampson, the author of several books and short stories from Bain Books. Robert, thank you for joining me today.
No, thank you.
So the first question I have for you is about generally science fiction. What is it that drew you to science fiction?
Well, the thing about it is that science fiction drew me into science, and then the science drew me into science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I am a scientist. I'm a neuroscientist, and I work with the brain and memory. But when I was young and I was impressionable and trying to get an idea of what I wanted to do for a career, I saw a TV show called The $6 Million Man.
Mm-hmm.
And The $6 Million Man just absolutely intrigued me because I said, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, the field didn't exist, but I started studying physiology, pharmacology, and eventually got into neuroscience. And about 4 to 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I was at a meeting with a government agency that funded a lot of this, and I saw at that meeting we had all of the neurotechnology, and we saw bionic limbs, we saw implants for various neurological disorders that were very much what was that field. And so part of it is, yes, that inspired me, and then I wanted to give a little bit back because I always find the idea of what you can do with science to be fascinating.
Yeah, that's because there's both like a practical application of what you can do with the current, and then there's the what could we do with if we advance enough.
Right.
Which I think I noticed that theme when I was looking at your books. What my next question is there an author or a series that influenced the way that you write, that you should say your style is close to this person or this series?
I can only say I hope that my style is close to those who influenced me. One of the greatest influences in my work was Larry Niven.
Yep, Larry Niven.
And so I can only hope that I do him honor in the way I write. James P. Hogan was another of the influences, and I loved the way you saw a little bit of the slice of life of somebody, a scientist, engineer, computer scientist, who were trying to do their job in a science fiction setting.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really cool because Larry Niven is not just an influence on you, but so many of the Bain authors have talked about his influence, and he's been around for a while, and he's also written at Bain, so it kind of comes full circle there.
Yes, it does.
You published the book The Moon and the Desert, which I believe, is that a standalone novel?
For now,
it
is a standalone novel. I actually start working on the sequel in this next month.
That's wonderful. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what that novel is about?
Well, as I mentioned, I was inspired by the $6 Million Man, and I worked with and studied with the people that made the science of bionics real. So I wanted to set the record straight, update it, correct a few things. In Martin Caidin's original novel, Cyborg, astronaut Steve Austin is badly injured and is rebuilt as a bionic man. It was done against his will, and he wasn't exactly a volunteer. He didn't exactly want to do this, and once he was rebuilt, he sort of owed the secret government agency to do jobs for them. So essentially he was a spy.
Yeah.
And when we look at what is actually happening with the volunteers who help us test the neurological devices and the bionic limbs and the advanced prosthetics. They are that. They're volunteers. And the biggest thing is they just want to get back to live their life and do their job. So The Moon in the Desert is the story of Glenn Shepard, who is an astronaut. He's a flight surgeon. So he's a doctor who is trying to support a mission to Mars and is badly injured. And he has instructions that go against the common practice, which is to say, if I'm really badly hurt, then rebuild me. And I know you can do it. And it's, here's a little bit of money. And of course, his trust fund is hardly a drop in the bucket compared to what it actually will take. But they rebuild him. And you would think from TV and books and movies that once you slap on the bionics, then off you go back to work. Well, it's not that easy. I wanted to tell the story of the recovery, learning to walk again, learning to use and to control the bionics. But on top of that, it's a guy wanting to get back to his normal life, go back to what he wanted to do. And when something goes wrong with the Mars mission that goes ahead anyway, and his former girlfriend ends up getting his job, which he seriously resents. Something happens on the way back, and there has to be a rescue mission. And Glenn Shepard turns out to be the only person that can go.
Interesting.
And he also has to figure out what's wrong. And he has to come to terms with all of the feelings of someone took his job, someone he used to be close to, he feels stabbed him in the back, and also I just want to go prove myself that I could do this. These were the people that I was supposed to work with, and now here they are in danger, and I've got to go rescue them.
Well, I'm putting that on my TBR now. Just the science behind it is really interesting because you have a lot of the ideas of not just like how you do science, but like how do you test things? How do you get people involved? And it seems like you have quite a good knowledge and background in science. I believe you are a professor of, I'm gonna get this right, is it physiology?
Physiology and pharmacology.
Pharmacology.
I'm also a professor of neurology, and I teach in the program of neuroscience.
At which university do you teach?
Wake Forest University Medical School.
Wake Forest. Oh, I know that's a good school. How has that, other than the way you've talked before, how has that influenced the way that you write, your background as a professor?
There's a little bit of a tendency in terms of write what you know to get a little more technical and a little bit teachy in the process.
Yeah.
And so there is a risk of too much of an info dump. And I have to scale that back.
Yes.
I mean, don't do that. It's not a good idea.
Even non-professors have that problem.
But one of the things that I teach is communicating science, where I'm teaching the students how to talk about science to the public without being too technical, too much jargon,
Right.
and going too far into depth. Coming up with a way to make it relatable, and a very important thing is the research I do. What does it mean to you, the public, to you, the audience,
Right.
why do we do this? And so this is the sort of thing that I teach, and that has had an influence in how I write, because if I'm getting something technical, then I need to show why it's important. And not go into the technical, go into the human.
I was talking with one of the other authors at Bain, and they talked about the need of taking something that you can say in many words and saying it shorter, not just because the audience needs it there, but because you want to be as concise as possible. And that's the fact that you're cognizant of that is a good trait in a writer.
I make my students do 5-minute talks. They have to talk about their own work. In fact, their first assignment is, tell me what you're doing in 7 minutes. Okay, I want you to do it again in 5. And so we practice this. It's not something everybody does. It's something that I've developed for the classes. And I think being able to cover it concisely is important. And then as a writer, I'm not spending 20 pages on an info dump. I'm not giving you 20 pages on what Glenn Shepard's artificial skin is made of.
Right.
I'm just telling you, it's artificial skin, and his aunt is looking at it and saying, so smooth, just like a baby's skin. I mean, that's all you really have to do.
Yeah. So that's your Moon in the Desert is not your only book. You also have a book, Operation Nightfall. Can you talk a little bit about that book?
Operation Nightfall is a novella.
Okay.
It is a story that takes place at a Boy Scout camp.
Okay.
And one of the camp counselors is teaching an astronomy class at night, and they see what they thought was a meteor go overhead. And it's not a meteor, it was an experimental spacecraft. And it crashes on the Boy Scout camp.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, that the father of one of the boys who's at camp happens to know a little bit of something about the program that is responsible for this secret space plane. And so they find that the pilot has survived, mm-hmm. and needs to be is injured and is going to have to spend time to recover. And they also find out that it's not possible to get the wreckage out of the camp secretly in any short period of time. So the camp decides that for the rest of the summer, they're space camp. And they get props from the movie studio. And so that if anybody were to realize that this great big crate in the middle of camp that is stamped with a movie set stamp on it, property of, if they get a look at it, they're just going to think it's a prop. And so they have to hide it in plain sight.
That is a great premise. I really like that, because you're taking kind of absurdist humor a little bit, and you're combining that with something that could totally happen at the same time. And that I can imagine. I can imagine how fun that one was.
It was very much fun.
And you said it's a novella. How long is it?
It is about 23,000 words. It comes in at right about 100 pages.
That makes sense. I'm very interested. Is it in print at all, or is it only ebook?
It's actually ebook and print, available through. You can actually order it through Barnes & Noble. You can order it in all of the major Books A Million, Half Price Books. You can order it straight from Ingram Spark. You can order it from Amazon.
Okay, well, that's nice. And then you also have contributed to anthologies, right, and short story collections. Can you talk about how that process is, whether you're working as a contributor or as an editor? What is your process of how you write and how you edit compared with working on a novel?
It's very, very different process. When I'm in the creative process of trying to come up with a short story or a novel, I can't be doing the technical things like my science writing or even the editing. So in Stellaris, this is a mixture of nonfiction and fiction. It's about 1/3 nonfiction and 2/3 fiction. And I have both a science article and a short story in it, and then had to edit it.
Yeah.
And as an editor, I sort of have to go back and put on my professor cap, and I'm reading it and I'm going, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. This sentence doesn't flow. This doesn't. You told me that it happened here. You're telling me about what happens here, but in this earlier point here, something happens that refers back to what you didn't tell me till later. You're going to have to change the order. You're going to have to change the sequence. Now, when I'm writing creatively, I'm writing my own fiction. I'm writing as I go along, and I don't necessarily see that particular problem. I don't necessarily see the problem where on page 60, I said, and he was traumatized by what happened at Asimov Station, and it doesn't occur to me until page 200 that I'm saying, okay, so he had this friend who was on Asimov Station, and here's what happened, and then you go, wait a minute, no, that you're going to have to say that earlier. So that actually comes out in the editing process. Mm-hmm. And so whether I am the anthology editor or my own second pass editor on
Right.
what I'm writing, I have to keep those things in mind, and it's a totally different mindset.
It's a new muscle to flex.
It's a new muscle to flex, and when I'm writing the fiction, I tend to concentrate a lot more on the character and less on the sequence of the action, which actually is, one of the things I then have to go back and fix, and then I have to look at how somebody else does it. And the most important thing I have learned as an editor is don't try to make the author write it the way I would write.
Right. You want the author's voice to still be there. You just want it to fit what your overall plan is
Right.
for the collection. That makes sense. Do you have any tropes that you particularly enjoy either reading or writing yourself?
A lot of my reading these days is not hard science fiction, so that I don't have an interference. I'm set myself a fairly heavy writing schedule right now, and so I'm staying away from a lot of science fiction as I do that. But one of the things I mentioned, a favorite author being James P. Hogan, and Hogan wrote scientists and engineers. And he wrote the rather humorous conflict between scientists and engineers, because scientists come up with the ideas and engineers have to make it happen. And they usually end up cursing the scientists because, you just can't fit all of those pieces into one housing. And I like that idea. The scientist has to figure it out. I went back and I looked, and so many of the characters I've written have been scientists or science adjacent or something like that. Even in the military science fiction that I have written, my character is probably a scientist or a doctor or something like that. So as far as tropes are concerned, I go with the scientist character. A trope I am particularly fond of is making a reference to music passages, music phrases in my writing. One of my favorite groups is Sabaton. And through Sabaton, if you're interested, you can go back and learn an awful lot of history. You listen to a song and say, where'd that come from? Go read up, find out about it. And on several short stories, I've actually taken I've used the battle that I researched as a process of trying to figure out what a song was, and use that as the basis for a story. You file off the serial numbers, set it in space, and you already know what the action is going to be, so you just write the characters in place.
So my final question is, where can people find you online, and do you have anything that you would specifically like to promote as your newest thing or upcoming thing?
So I do have a website, rehampson.com, rehampson.com, and at that website you will actually find links to the latest science, the neuroscience that I do, as well as links that will show you and tell you all about the anthologies I have short stories in, the novels that I have written or am working on, a lot of science nonfiction essays that I have written for science fiction and reader audiences. And so there's just there's a whole lot of work there that you can hopefully be one-stop shop for figuring out what it is I do and what I've written. Now, as far as what I have right now, The Moon in the Desert is my latest novel that is in a trade paperback size, hopefully coming out in a mass market paperback in the spring of this next year, or maybe this winter. I am working on a novel in John Ringo's Black Tide universe, and I have finished the first volume of that story. When that is set aside and submitted, then I will be working on a sequel to The Moon in the Desert, tentatively called The Sands of Mars.
Okay, that keeps the theme going. I like the naming convention there.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. I love talking books, talking stories, and how we come up with them.
So you can find his book in places like Amazon and in Barnes and Nobles everywhere, and you can find him. Do you have a social media presence?
Yes, I am on both Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. And until next time, I'm Jonathan. and thank you for watching.